Okay, so the first question that I'm asking is really, why do we learn Gemara? Let's maybe even take away, what's on my screen. Why do you think, why is it so important to learn Gemara? I mean, why did you join our class? I'd love to hear your thoughts before I share my thoughts.
I think it's like a foundation of like Judaism and like our history. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like part of understanding like why what we do today or how we got to where we are today.
That's two thoughts, and they're both beautiful. One is understanding Judaism and why we're doing what we do today, and the second one is historical, to understand how we got here and the history of Judaism.
I have always been curious
Mm-hmm.
about Gemara because I was always told that I wasn't allowed to learn, which made me even more curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of see it as if like the Gemara is the bones, so to speak, or the more hard structure, and then there's Chassidut, which is more of like the like I feel like they complement each other,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanna like learn this side, which I never have.
Mm-hmm. You want to sort of like make the connections between the Gemara and the Chassidut.
Can.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Okay, you could share more thoughts as we go along. So, just like Hannah said, it's the foundation. It's really the foundation for living our life fully as Jews, also for fulfilling the mitzvot. Everything is really inside it. And sort of to say as proof of this thought is we read the Gemara, it discusses halacha, it discusses different aspects of the halacha. And through that, we learn how to live our lives as observant Jews. Again, I don't know the backgrounds of everyone here. I'm not making any assumptions. Yet I could share that as a student of halacha. I studied a lot of halacha during the last 5 years. It's fascinating, the gap between like learning the halacha, just what to do, and learning it with the whole background, seeing the beginning, the sugya, the different opinions, and later on also the other opinions of the Rishonim who were interpreting it. And that just made the whole understanding of the halacha so much more deeper, enhanced. And yet, I want to question this beautiful answer. I'm not saying it's correct, but I just want to question it because we know that there are a lot of sources that tell us that studying Torah is a value in its own. There's a value to studying Torah without the getting to a goal of fulfilling the mitzvot, just for the fact that we're studying Torah. And I mean, if the goal of the studying Torah is to fulfill the mitzvot, there are tons of parts in the Gemara that are not relevant for our lives today, whether it's because the Beit Mikdash is not built, so that's like, okay, we could study it because we are hoping that it will become relevant, but what about parts are talking about slaves and different parts? So why do we need to study them? And we do study them, and we believe that there is also a purpose for them. So how do we enhance our answer? And I want to offer a second answer, and that is that the Gemara is a guide for Jewish spirituality and thought. It is I mean, also when we study theoretical material, stuff that is not relevant for us, we could find within it ideas that enhance us, Jewishly, spiritually, in understanding what Judaism is all about. And why do we do it? I mean, what's our goal? And that's the second answer here, searching for the truth. We're trying to find the truth. In the Gemara itself, we study a lot of opinions. We have his opinion, we have that opinion. We'll present it when we see the Mishna, and we'll see that at the time of the Gemara itself, they already knew that one of the opinions that they're discussing was not accepted for halacha. It was already accepted that the other person's opinion is accepted, but yet the Gemara bothers to take the time and study and understand the meaning of that other person's, first scholar's opinion, even though it was rejected from halacha, because they want to understand the truth, the depth behind it. And that in itself is a value of its own. And the Gemara is so associative, and it goes from one place to another. We'll see that it starts in one place and then it says, oh, that reminds me of something else. And we start learning about something else that isn't exactly relevant for what we started from. But it starts rolling, and it just has an opinion. It has an opinion about everything. Every little thing that you could think of, it talks about. And I think that presents life. Why does that present life? Because that's what our life is about. We start our morning, we make a phone call for work, we serve breakfast to our children, we run to work, we do this at the same time we're making appointments for a doctor. Our life is associative, and it runs from one place to another. So the associative flow of the Gemara is sort of a lively flow, and it's sort of imitating life in the form of a book. And I think that enhances the importance of learning Gemara to something so much wider and deeper than just saying, oh, just so you know what to do. Want to know what to do? Open Mishna Torah from the Rambam, open Shulchan Aruch. We'll have the answers there, but I think that just opening up what's behind it, besides understanding the Shulchan Aruch so much better, it just makes us different people through the study of Gemara. And I also chose to present this first part of the lesson in this form because this is what the Gemara is about. It asks a question, then it gives an answer. The answer sounds perfectly fine, but then the Gemara says, but just a second, I want to question that, or tries to reject it and brings proof for its rejection. And then it offers a second answer. A second answer could be enhancing the first answer, or could take us to a different direction and open up a horizon that we didn't even think of. The second question, and it will open up and develop the question. So I presented this part of the lesson sort of in the form of a sugya in the Gemara. What is a sugya? Sugya is a unit of study. In the Gemara, we'll try to determine the definition of that when we start going. Although this is an introductory lesson, I felt we can't start learning the Gemara without some introduction, without some intro. But on the other hand, I think it's complicated to just talk about the Gemara a lot without learning the Gemara. So we are having some introduction, some like basic foundations that I think are good to have in mind as we start going. But we will do a lot of intro studying as we go along. We'll see a term that is a code word. We'll explain it. We'll bring a definition. We'll see the names of the sages. We'll give their biography and talk about it a little bit. And when we'll do it more and more, we'll slowly get a wider picture and of all the sort of introduction, background, and material of the Gemara. So let's present a few other ideas of the beauty of the study of the Gemara. Okay, so the first one is, as I already said, it's inclusive and comprehensive. Everything is in it. We just find everything. If Chen mentioned before the idea of Chassidut versus what's in the Gemara, I think that the roots of the Chassidut and the Kabbalah themselves are also in the Gemara, besides the Halacha, Agadah, thought, quotes from here and there, different discussions. I mean, all the different genres of Judaism are in it, are inside the Gemara, and they're intertwined. Later on, they break up into different genres, different books, a book just about this, a book just about that. But in the Gemara, it's everything is inside. And also, I think when we study Gemara, we are connecting to the center and the core of the development of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah. I mean, the oral Torah, we received the oral Torah at Mount Sinai. With Moshe received it with the written Torah, but the central, most serious development of it happens at the time of the Mishna and the Talmud. And I think just connecting to that process is amazing. The Gemara itself is also, it's more than what I wrote here, just a live organ. It's becoming part of the live discussion or discourse of the Gemara. You're sitting, you feel like you're sitting at a table in the room, in the Beit Midrash, with the sages themselves, with Rava, arguing with Abaye, with Rav, questioning Shmuel. And you're part of the development of the Torah itself through the study of the Gemara. I think it's so beautiful because we see the discussions between them. Sometimes it just, he said, sometimes they actually answer each other back, and they scold each other, they yell at each other, they make jokes about each other. We're really part of their life and part of the whole development of the Gemara, and we become part of it when we join the study and try to understand it and try to figure it out. And on the emotional aspect, I think through all these, through the live discussion, we feel like it's part of us, and we feel like that it's relevant for us, and we develop some care towards it, and that gives us motivation to continue studying, because studying Gemara is hard sometimes, and there's a lot of you might feel like you're studying something and it's you're getting to that end and it's difficult, and yet the personal connection to it gives you the motivation to go on. And I think that when we study this way, when we feel like we're part of the center and core of the development of the oral Torah, and we take part of the live discussion, and we feel like it's relevant for us, it also becomes relevant for our lives today. Make that connection of how this sugya that is talking about something so remote from us has some meaning to our life today. And in order to understand the big picture, we need to go down into details, and the Gemara loves going down into great detail. And we will be constantly running in and running out, running in and running out. We'll be learning the little details, and then we'll be stopping and saying, okay, this unit that we studied, what is it about? And through the study, we will start connecting to the big picture. And those of you who are continuing with us from the previous unit, when we studied Masechet Rosh Hashanah, I actually felt very sorry because we stopped like in the middle of the chapter. We had a few more pages to finish the chapter. We didn't even finish the unit that we were in. And on the other hand, one of the ideas that we were discussing just then at the end, but I'll refer to when we get to it in the study. And of course, those of you who are joining us now, I'll give you all the information you need to make the connection. But it seems like our Gemara picks up right from there. So those of you who are already learning with me for the second time, things are going to start connecting between Masechtot. So the seeing of the big picture is happening faster than we expect, even though sometimes you need to study a lot to say, hey, I saw that also over there, and now let's make that connection. Because when you start out, we learn how to find on the connections. We'll open them up, we'll see it there, and we'll understand our page a bit better. But when we get to there and we learn it, we'll know our page so well. Wow, things are connecting, and we end up seeing some bigger picture in it. So we'll also try to do this in the smaller units of our study by learning in great detail and then stopping and saying, okay, what's the idea behind what we just did? And in order to reach that goal, it's not easy. It's difficult. We'll have to think hard and work hard. But I mean, part of what makes the Gemara part of us. Sorry, there's a fly here in the room next to me. Part of what makes the Torah ours and it makes us really feel connected to it is that hard work and the sense of accomplishment when we have reached the answers, reached our goals, or at least partially even. And talking about this, the difficulty of the learning of Gemara, this fly really wants to learn Gemara with us. So I brought here a story. I know it's a lot of text. I even cut off a little bit of it. But here's a beautiful midrash from Tanhuma, talking about the importance of learning Gemara, but also the difficulty. I forgot to change the title. It's supposed to be the difficulty of learning Gemara, of the oral Torah, and I think it will give a nice twist and interesting idea. So I'll read it quickly. You could follow with your eyes, if that helps, to read it. It's long, but it's very readable. It says elsewhere in Scripture, in reference to the oral Torah, neither is it found in the land of the living. Okay, this is in the book of Iyov. It isn't found in the land of the living. What is the meaning of the verse? Neither is it found in the land of the living. Does it mean that the oral law is found only among the deceased? I mean, you need to die to really find the oral Torah? Indeed not. So the Midrash is basically saying this is a metaphor. You need to sort of kill yourself over the study of the Torah. It means that the oral law is not found among those who pursue the pleasure of this world, its passions, its glory, or its greatness, but only among those who deprive themselves for its sake. As it is said, this is the law when a man dies in a tent. Okay, some development here of this idea. I just left it for the dead. It's again a development of the Midrash. And here are the 3 points. The Midrash continues discussing the same idea, and it reaches the story of Ma'amad Har Sinai, the receiving of the Torah at Ma'amad Har Sinai. And there's this famous Midrash that says that Hashem forced the Torah on us. He held the mountain of Mount Sinai right up on top of all the people of Israel and said, "Are you accepting the Torah? Well, just a second, before you say yes or no, you should know. If you say yes, fantastic. If you say no, the mountain will fall on you and you will die on the spot." And that's kafalem har kigit. He sort of forced the Torah. They didn't really have a choice to accept the Torah. I won't develop that idea with the ideas behind it, but only in the specific context of this Midrash. Rav Dimi, the son of Chama, stated that the Holy One, blessed be He, told Israel, if you accept the Torah, well and good. But if not, your grave will be here. Okay, that's the quote from that Midrash. Now he's explaining it. If you should say, you might have thought that he arched the mountain over them because of the written law, the Torah Shebichtav. I mean, that's what, if you were asked, it's a written Torah, the oral Torah. I don't think you ever thought to differentiate between them, but Rav Dimi has an idea about this. And he says, no, the written law, isn't it true that as soon as he said to them, will you accept the Torah, they all responded, we will do and hear. That happens a bit sooner. It happens twice in the story, so he must be referring to one of them. Because the written law was brief and required no striving and suffering, of course they said yes. It was easy, it was simple. They said, yeah, sure, no problem. But rather, he threatened them because of the oral law. After all, it contains the detailed explanations of the commandments, both simple and difficult. And it is as severe as death and as jealous as Sheol. Sheol is hell, one of the names. One does not study the oral law unless he loves the Holy One, blessed be He, with all his heart, and with all his soul, and with all his might. As it is said, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. That's a quote from Mishna. So I think here there's 2 twists here. One is about the written law versus the oral law. Yeah, he didn't need to force it upon them with the mountain for the written law, because they accepted it. That's not a problem they would have accepted. But it's the oral law that is so complex here. He's describing the complexity. That's, if he had enforced on them, they would have said, no, thank you. But what's the second twist? The connection of the love to the Torah, making it really with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your might. And it's that connection to the heart and tying yourself to it and gluing yourself to it to really be connected to it with all your might. And I think that's through that love and passion, that's what makes your connection to the oral law, through the love. Because if you didn't have that passion, you'll just, say, never mind, drop the mountain on my head. Whence do you learn that this word love refers only to the studying the oral law? Observe what is written after this. And these words which I command thee this day shall be upon the heart. That's, again, part of the Shema. What words are alluded to here? The words of the oral law, which are upon the heart. Okay, so these things shall be on your heart. These things are the words of the oral Torah. He's giving us a new interpretation to the Shema by saying that these words of the oral law shall be upon our heart.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm just finding this very interesting that, like, first of all, the death in life is very interesting because truly a deep choice in life is necessarily connected somehow in a choice not of death and of life. It really goes together. But it's interesting to me that the word about the deprivation, is that what the Jewish version of love is? Like, and it's saying it comes from a deep love, but at the beginning it's saying that if you have appreciation for the pleasures of this world and you're distracted by that and you're not depriving yourself in order to learn, so you're not going to get it. It's kind of
extreme.
Essentially, I'm reading that it's saying that love is a willingness to deprive yourself.
I missed the last two words.
That deep love is a willingness to deprive yourself. And that's interesting to me.
For the oral Torah, deprive yourself at least to a certain extent. It seems very extreme here. I agree with you that this gives a very extreme definition of, you need to really, deprive yourself totally to extreme for the oral law. If we were studying just this context, the story of Kafalem Halki of Mamad al-Sinai, the receiving the Torah, and its comparisons, the different Midrashim about, we would probably seen this story or Rav Dimi, the son of Chama's opinion, in the context of other opinions, and then it would have been interesting to see in which ways they explain that situation and say, okay, he is taking it to extreme. We have other opinions about, passions and glory of the world. Also, in general, if we take it to different contexts, if we have the Nazir, the Jewish Nazir, is very different than the Christian Nazir, for any of you who are familiar with that. And he needs to give an offering of chatat, an offering of a sin after the period of time that he is a Nazir. And there's a question that is arise: why does he get punished? I mean, he chose to become a Nazir to become spiritually connected to Hashem, and to become closer to Hashem, and to become maybe deprive himself from the pleasures. He's doing exactly what this midrash is encouraging him to do. And the explanation is because he deprived himself from a good cup of wine and other. I always forget the list of things that Nazir doesn't do, but he deprived himself from things that he could benefit from the world, and we're not supposed to deprive ourselves, even though what he did was a good idea. So that gives a more complex context to this midrash. And same thing also with the Shema. We need to see what other ideas are out there regarding the Shema and the explanation of to love the Hashem with all our heart and all our soul and all our might. There's so many different explanations for it, and it's just interesting to see this specific explanation and in the context of the oral law. But I agree with all the thoughts that came up as you were reading it. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so now we're going on to the second part of the introduction, talking a little bit about Gemara study in general. We'll talk about the structure, and then we'll talk more about history, geography, and so on. And so, what's the foundation of the Gemara? We have here the 6 Berim. It's the 6. In English, it's called the 6 orders because Seder is order, and the Mishnah has a very nice order. I found this picture online, and I just copied it, and it has here the 6. Basically, going to details. So I'll give you the background. So basically, during the time of the Mishnah, which is it's very hard to define the time. When exactly did it start? Here we have in the next we have time here, Second Temple period, so 70 CE. So that's why I say second time period, because when exactly does it start? At Shivat Zion, return to Zion with Ezra and Nehemiah could be the beginning of the oral Torah period, and the Mishnah period, but we could take it later on to like the last tens of years of the last decades of the time of the Second Temple period. But I think that we could definitely extend it to the beginning of the Second Temple period. All of the oral Torah that was passed in tradition from Har Sinai till that day, they started to arrange it in different I forgot the English word for kovets, different arrange. They arranged the material in different, units, according to topic, and those units slowly got the form of a book. It is today accepted that this book was not edited in writing. That means this is all done orally in their head. Okay, we're not talking here about a book that someone's holding, but rather arranging the oral Torah orally. So it's not it's not a writing of a book, and it slowly gets the form of the 6 books of the Mishnah according to topics. So the first topic here is Zra'im, is seeds. It's all of the mitzvot ba'aretz, the mitzvot that are dependent on the land of Israel. We live in the land of Israel to do these mitzvot, except for a few exceptions, like chala. We do mitzvah chala in Chutz La'aretz, but it is a general definition. And the first Masechet Brachot, the topic is Brachot is not exactly the same context, but it is part of it. The Masechet Brachot is talking about the blessings and tefillah, prayer. That's the opening of the Mishnah. The second unit is festivals, Moed. It's all the starting with Shabbat. Everything is also connected to Shabbat, and all the Jewish festivals. That's Pesach. Shkalim is connected to the half a shekel that we need to give before Purim. Before Pesach, actually, Yoma is Yom Kippur. Sukkah for Sukkot. Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Hashanah. Megillah is Purim, and then we have Beitzah, Moed Katan, and Ta'anit that are about the laws of Yom Tov, the laws of Chol HaMoed, and different also offerings that are connected to it. And we have Tanit. Tanit is our Masechet that we'll be studying. You see, it comes right after Rosh Hashanah. It's also chronologically connected, and we'll understand its connection. Tanit is about all the different fasts that we have in the event that it doesn't rain. And actually, it starts the first half of the first chapter is actually we're not anticipating a year without rain. We're anticipating a year with rain, so we start by adding it to our prayer, and that's the first part, that part of the prayer. So we'll understand the location of Tanit in this in the order of Moed as we in the next lesson actually, and also as we go into the Gemara. The next unit is Nashim, women, all the laws of family, basically. Yevamot, Ketubot, Nedarim, here's Nedarim and Nazir. So it is and isn't connected. So Tagitin, so it's marriage and divorce, and the Ketuba, that's the legal document between the husband and wife, and so on. And the next one is Nezikin, that's damages. So that the first one, Baba Kama, Baba Mitzia, and Baba Batra. For those of you who know Hebrew well enough to notice that all the names of the Sdilim here are Masechtot, of all the tractates are in Hebrew. These are the only 3 that are in Aramaic. Baba means gate, Kama is first gate, Mitzia is the central, so it's a central gate, and Batra is the last gate. So it was actually a very long tractate, 30 chapters long, that was broken up into 3 smaller units, and they got the first, the middle, and the last gates. And the Masechet, the 30 chapter Masechet, was originally called Nezikin, damages, and that's what it talks about. And all the other Masechet, your Sanhedrin is how the court works, and also Makot is related to it. Shvuot and Eduyot, that's all the different swearings that there are different times when you swear over your edut is I forgot the word in English again. Sorry, I always have these blackouts with my English. Here,
Edut is witness.
Witness, exactly. the witnesses. So there's different cases that you need to swear for your witness. Ediyot is the witnesses. Ediyot is actually a very fascinating masechet. It's not about witnesses in court. It's all the now it's a different meaning of the word edut. It's all the sages who are giving in their all the halachot of the old Torah that they remember from earlier times. That's very fascinating masechet. And Avodah Zarah is idol worship. And Avot, again, each order has a slightly a few masechet that you're not sure, tractates, I'm not sure why they're there, but you needed to fit them into the 6 orders in some place. And Horayot is also different laws that are connected to the court. Oaths, yeah, oaths is eduyot, but in the context of shvuot, but not in the context of masechet eduyot. And kodashim and tarot is a lot of laws that are connected to Beit HaMikdash. Tarot is purity, so we have a masechet nida in there. And kodashim is all the different halachot that are connected to offerings in Beit HaMikdash. And chulin, here is the one about basar v'chalav, milk and meat, and kashrut. All the laws of kashrut are in there. I actually only studied Masechet Chulin for the first time when I was learning the laws of kashrut. And when I was studying halacha, and I was like, why was I never introduced to this Masechet? Because we always focus on brachot, moed, all the laws of moed, nashim. We never get to the end parts, and that's actually a very relevant tractate. Okay, so that's the basically, so all the oral Torah is being arranged into by topic, and you see it loosely is by topic, these 6 topics. In Hebrew, there's an acronym, Zman and Nakat, the first letters of each word, Zayin, Mem, Nun, that's Zman, that's time. Nakat is a word that has a meaning, but not in the context of the acronym Nun, Kuf, Tet, so that helps remember the names of the 6 orders. So each big unit, one of the 6 darim is called an order. Each one of the books inside is called a tractate. And within each tractate, it's divided into chapters. And each chapter is divided into tiny paragraphs. Each paragraph is called a Mishna. So the biggest unit, the whole book, the whole series is called a Mishna. And also the smallest unit is also called a Mishnah, which I find very fascinating. What's the meaning of the word Mishnah? It's from the word lishanen, to repeat something over and over again in order to memorize it, because as I said, this book was an oral book, and some very, very brilliant people with a very fascinating memory, they were the bookkeepers. They had the book in their head, and they were called the Tanaim. The Torah scholars from the time of the Mishnah are called Tanaim. But actually, the original Tana was that a person who knew the whole book by heart. And when they weren't sure of the exact wording of the Mishnah at the time of the Gemara, when they were studying the Mishnah, they would go to the Tana, to the book, and ask him what exactly does it say here and there, to have the exact version of the Mishnah. So that's a little bit about the meaning of the word Mishnah. A little bit about the content of the Mishnah. So that's the next one. First of all, because it was a book that was studied orally, so it's staccato, it's very short, short lines, very brief, very repetitive ideas that it's 3 things, 4 things, and different wordings are repeated to help memorize it more easily. And we see that when the Amoraim, that's the next generation, the time of the Gemara, when they study the Mishnah, because they're used to the rhythm and they know it by heart, every time they go out, the Mishnah goes out of rhythm, they'll immediately jump and say, hey, why is it going out of rhythm? And they'll try to explain it. Why is the Mishnah choosing a different rhythm here, even though it's 5 tractates away, because it's 1 tractate for here and that tractate there, but it's very easy to remember it. Of course, also the Gemara was edited orally. It's so much more complex, but at least here we're in the smaller book. So it's very short, concise halachot. It is a legal book. It's a book of halacha. It has all a lot of laws, it starts, from the middle of the topic sometimes, and it sort of like assumes you know where it is. That's the next box, the familiarity, but it has in a lot of halachot, and rarely do we have in it Agadah, stories, Midrashim, that's homiletics. Sometimes it will appear, those homiletics, those Agadot or Midrashim will appear at an end of a unit. That means we might have a tractate, for example, the tractate of Sukkah. It has 5 chapters, but 2 chapters talk about the building of the Sukkah. 1 chapter talks about the 4 species, and another 2 chapters talk about the Misuch HaMayim, Tzimchat Yeshava. So it's 3 different units, and at the end of one of them we have a story. So that's sort of like a unit breaker. That sometimes, if we're not sure how to divide the different chapters, the Midrash will help us. In our tractate in Tanit, we have the famous story of Choni Me'agel, that man who stood through the circles and prayed for rain. So that is part of our Mishnah, that Agadah. Someone is mouse is by mistake drawing pictures on our screen. Could somehow stop it. I don't know how to stop it myself. Okay, I'll figure out how to stop other people from doing these mistakes. But in the meantime, we don't need the text. I won't do anything about it. And so again, the Gemara, the Mishnah sort of assumes our familiarity. They expect us to know what it's talking about. So it sometimes it's in the middle of the topic, or talks about it without giving us introduction. This is the idea. This is the halakha. This is what you do. Then these are the details. Sometimes it just starts with the details. So it assumes familiarity. That means you need to always be studying it and going back to it to get the background. And if we're talking about ourselves, so yes, we could use different introductions that others created for us to sort of get into the topic and understand what it's about. Sometimes what will help us will be opening up the Torah and just reading the psukim. We don't always have a background in the Torah for the topic. It depends again on the topic. The bottom line. So I'm actually not going to say that the Mishnah gives us the bottom line. It's actually the opposite. You cannot paskin halacha from the Mishnah. The Mishnah, the purpose of the Mishnah, the goal of the Mishnah is not to give us the bottom line, but rather to open up all the different ideas, to give us the different opinions, to be a compilation of all the oral Torah from that time. And therefore, it doesn't give us a bottom line, but rather presents a bunch of opinions. And only later on, in the time of the Gemara, did they develop different tools to determine what is the halacha in different cases. For example, if we have the opinion of one singular person, and next to it, there's the opinion, opinion without a name. So that's sort of assumed to be the sages, Tanakama. So it's singular against many. So passing halacha yachid verabim, halacha verabim. Or a personal, one person, Rabbi Yossi is arguing with Rabbi Yehuda. So the halacha in this case will always be according to Rabbi Yossi. So these rules are later to the time of the Mishnah. The purpose of the Mishnah is not to tell us what the bottom line is, but rather to present the scope of the ideas. We'll see also that the Gemara does the same thing. Any questions about the Mishnah? Okay, so let's say go on. So here's a little bit about the, I think I will, the only way I know to erase these squiggles is to stop share and reshare. So I'll do that quickly. Just so it's easier for you to follow and also for those who are following the recording. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is more the Tanaim themselves. We said the Torah scholars in the time of the Mishnah are the Tanaim, and as I mentioned before, the time period is at the Second Temple period. We won't even try to determine when during the Second Temple period. And we have a few generations. I did not present it here. according to the generations. I will occasionally, when I give you the biographies of different people from this list and others, they're just like the main names of each time period. I might mention he's from the 4th generation of the Mishnah, but I find it confusing. The Gemara timeline has very clear generations, and each person belongs to some generations. It's easier to follow. In the time of the Zugot, I think the Mishnah, I think it's easier to remember more historically with the story of their first, the Jewish centers in Jerusalem till the year 70 when the temple was destroyed. Then after the destruction of the temple, they moved, the Jewish center moves to Yavne, and it's not everybody live in Yavne. There's also a big community in Lod, which is very close. People did live in other cities, but the Beit Din, the president, the Torah scholars, their center was in Yavne, and not exactly a generation later, more like a generation or two later, everybody slowly moves up to the Galil, and the center also moves to the Galil, and that's also for about 2 generations. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, that's Rabbi. Every time it says in the Gemara Rabbi, usually we pronounce it Rebbe, so like with an E. It's Rabbi. It's referring. It's a honor. Honorable name to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was the last president, and he took all that book that's been developing throughout this whole period of time, and put it in its final form, which is the form that we sit and study today. So let's go down into the details. So the Zugot here, who are the Zugot? During the time of the last few decades of the Second Temple period, the leaders of the Jewish community were in pairs. One was the Nasi, the president, and one was Av Beit Din, the head of the Jewish court. And they were both great Torah scholars. I mean, the president was more in charge of connection with the Romans and other, sort of like running, the system. But he was also Torah scholar, not only the Av Beit Din, not only the head of the court. And I put their names here. So it's Rabbi Yossi ben Yoezer and Yossi ben Yochanan, Yoshua ben Prachia and Itai Arbeli, Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shatach, Shmaya and Avtalion, and Hillel and Shammai. And those of you who are a little bit familiar with with the different stories from the time of the Mishnah and different names, you'll notice that as I went through the list, the names became more and more familiar, because the first 2.5, 3 pairs, we don't know almost anything about them. They appear in Masechet Avot, the Tractate of Avot that we saw in the Seder of Nezikin, and we know a little bit of the Torah that they taught, but that's it. We barely know much about them and their activity. And it doesn't mean they didn't have a lot of activity. It's just we don't have any much material about them. I'm sure if you Google about them, you could read more. Shimon ben Shatach is very famous because he was at the time of Holdus and connected to him. And then Shmaya and Avtalion are the 2 famous Nasi and Av Beit Din, the 2 famous Torah scholars who were converts. And from the story with Hillel, the next president, who wanted to study in their yeshiva, and he wasn't allowed to enter the yeshiva, and he went and studied from the roof. And it happened to be the one day of snow in Israel, and he was snowed in. So that was Shmaya and Avtalion, who were the 2 Torah scholars who looked up in the morning and saw a face of a man in their window on the roof. And Hillel and Shammai, of course, they're very famous also for themselves and mostly for their students. Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel are the students of, the house of is how we refer to like the school of thought of a certain teacher, and that's actually their students. After the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, the whole Jewish center transfers to Yavne, to the city of Yavne, and starting from Hillel, the presidents from the time of Hillel through Rebbe, that means Rebbe himself, are all a son of Hillel. That means the next Nasi is Hillel's son, and then his grandson, and so on. So that's Shimon and Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel ben Shimon, Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel ben Shimon. You see their names here. Shimon, Gamliel, there's another Shimon, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And he is the great grandson of Hillel. And he has 2 sons. One is called Shimon, one is called Gamliel. Don't worry, their names continue to the next generation. So that's the presidents from this period until year 200. And we don't have a partner. We don't have an Av Beit Din next to the Nasi, a head of the Jewish court. So that's why the time period of the Zugot ends with the destruction of Beit HaMikdash. And then we just have the president, and we also have just a lot of Torah scholars. Of course, there's other Torah scholars at the time of the Zugot too. But we definitely have more material in the sages' literature about Hillel and Shammai and on. So then they moved to Yavne, and the yeshiva is there for 1 or 2 generations. And then, as I said, the community slowly moves to up north. So the famous names here, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, he's famous for the story of escaping out of Jerusalem that's under a siege and asking the Roman leader in Israel to save the Jewish leadership and to give him the city of Yavne, give me the city of Yavne and its scholars. So he's famous for that story and a few others. Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Akiva are 3 great Torah scholars from that time. We'll probably see some stories about them. Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer will be in our first sugya. And Rabbi Akiva, of course, he's also famous for his story, but at the moment, I'll just point out that these 5 students in the next generation, I chose to write only their names, even though there's others. All 5 students, all 5 of them are the students of Rabbi Akiva. That means that the Torah, Rabbi Akiva, transfers to the time of the Galil. And now the Jewish community is spread out in the Galil, Beit She'arim, Tzipori, Tveria. The south is Caesarea. I know you think Caesarea is in the north, but for them, in their perspective, Caesarea is the south. Lod is like far south by now. And a generation and a half later, we reach Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair and Tzomchos. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but there's a few nice stories about them too, to conclude this time period. Oh my gosh, my time is up. Okay, we have still 5 minutes, so let's try to quickly finish the introduction. Here we go. So again, the language that they speak is Hebrew. They do speak a version of Aramaic that is local to Israel, but the Mishnah itself is fully in Hebrew. And that's like a little hint when you're studying Gemara. It's mostly in Aramaic, but there's a lot of text in Hebrew. If you see a text in Hebrew, there's a big chance that it's from the time of the Mishnah. That helps you unravel the layering of the Gemara. Where in Israel do they live? So these are all the names of the cities that I've mentioned before. So you have here the list. And the books that were developed at that time, besides the Mishnah, the Tosefta is a book that is parallel to the Mishnah. It's called Tosefta because Tosefta means addition. And it is the same structure as the Mishnah, just it has in it much more material. And we don't know if it's just a book that developed at the same time as the Mishnah and it's parallel to it, or maybe it's actually indeed taking the Mishnah and adding to it because the person who edited the Tosefta thought that the Mishnah is lacking material in it. And the name of the Tosefta, whoever gave it the name Tosefta, obviously thinks that's the origin of the book. I won't go into that this argument, just pointing out the question. And there's another genre of a book that's developed at that time is Midrashei Halacha. It's homiletics, but it's halachic homiletics. And they're based on the Parshat Shavua, on the Torah. So it will quote a pasuk from the Torah and give you all the halachot that are related to it. So if you want to know all the laws of Shabbat, you'll open the Mishnah, the tractate of Shabbat. Now there are laws of Shabbat in other places, but a lot of the material is in there, in Masechet Shabbat and Tractate Shabbat. If you open a Midrash Halacha and you want all the material about Shabbat, you need to open up every single place in the Torah that has a reference to Shabbat. That's like 5, 6, 7 places in the Torah, and then collect all that material. So it's a different way of arranging the material. Baraitot is a general word for all the material from the time of the Mishnah that was arranged in books that we lost the books. We know about them because they are quoted in the Mishnah, in the Gemara. And that's why they're called Baraita. Baraita in Aramaic means outside, because it's outside of what became accepted, the books that were accepted as the formal books, the authoritative books. They were copied, they were studied, they survived. The books that were not were slowly forgotten and lost. But those parts of them that were quoted in the Gemara survived. So those are the Baraitot. Another type of material that we find in the Gemara from the time of the Mishnah. Okay, so because my time is up, and I mean, I do have 2 minutes, so I won't talk too much about the time period of the Morim, or maybe I will do that, and then the other part of the introduction I'll do next week. So, no, too complicated for 3 minutes. Okay, so I'll do this at the beginning of the next lesson. I do want to talk a little bit about studying